Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So Saviors of Uldum is the new expansion been announced for Hearthstone, so pretty exciting news. It's coming out on August the 6th, so we really don't have long to wait. It's going to be focused around the League of Explorers, so we're going to have Reno Jackson and Finley Mergleton coming back into the game. We've seen those guys before. We don't know whether they're going to be coming back as cards or in other types of ways. So they've only released 8 cards, which I'll look at today. Also some new mechanics and some other stuff. So let's get straight into it and take a look at the cards. So first up, and some pretty big news, is that quests are coming back into the game. We've got 2 new quests to be looking at here today. Every class is going to be getting a quest. We have seen quests in the game before. If you don't know, they came in Journey to Unguru. They have rotated out into Wild now. But basically, you have to, these start in your hand at the start of every game. You can mulligan it away, but ultimately you want to play it at the start of the game because you need to complete some certain conditions. When you do, you get a reward, and then it theoretically makes your deck better. So let's have a look at this first one for Warlock. It's a 1 mana quest. It's Supreme Archaeology. Quest: draw 20 cards, and the reward is the Tomb of Origination, which is a hero power, which replaces your current hero power. 2 mana, draw a card, and that card costs 0. Now, the effect is very powerful, right? If you can draw a card and it costs 0, it's always really good in Hearthstone. The thing is that you have to draw 20 cards to complete this quest. So you're playing this on turn 1, and then you have to draw 20 cards before you can even get the reward. Now, the good thing is that Plot Twist Warlock could actually make use of this. One of the downsides of quests is that when it means you're not playing anything on turn 1. If you play your quest on turn 1, you're not impacting the game that turn. And we know Hearthstone is a big game about tempo, and you lose a lot of tempo by not playing anything on turn 1, especially if you can't follow it up with turn 2 and turn 3. Plot Twist Warlock, though, is a deck that I've been playing quite a lot of. It's more of a meme fun deck, but you don't actually play anything in the early game. It's much of a removal game until you can get to the end game where you get your big minions. Plus, Plot Twist allows you to draw lots of cards in one turn, so you could complete this quest quite easily. And finally, you do have a lot of big minions in that deck because you're trying to cheat them out with Fellord Betrug and also Dorian. So if you get this quest reward and you tap, you get a 0 mana 8 cost minion. It's pretty good, but in terms of playability in the game, I don't see this quest as being that powerful unless you're playing a Plot Twist Warlock or we see new card draw mechanics come into the game. It's going to be quite difficult to draw 20 cards. I mean, you do that in most games, but it doesn't happen till much later. Do you really want to be drawing cards that late in the game? Because you could be drawing into fatigue. It depends on what matchup you're playing, etc. So, yeah, a pretty cool effect. It can be very powerful, but I don't see it being something you put into every single Warlock deck at the moment, unless we see some more support cards for Warlock, because I think they need them. They weren't very good in this expansion, so it would be good to see Warlock get a little bit of a power boost in this next expansion. The next quest is called Untapped Potential for Druid. This has quest: end 4 turns with any unspent mana, and reward you get the Osirian Tear. And what this does is it means your choose 1 effect cards actually have both effects combined when you play them. So we've seen cards like this in Druid before, and the effect is very powerful. It's very, very good. But the problem with this quest, and I don't think this quest is very good, is that you have to lose so much tempo to do this. So I mentioned before that when you play the quest on turn 1, you already lose tempo. Well, this requires you, for the next few turns, the earliest possibly that you can complete this quest is turn 6, then you'd be losing 1 mana every turn. So let's just say end 4 turns with any unspent mana, plus the 1 mana that you wasted on turn 1. That's 5 mana that you've just thrown out into the air. And if you're playing against an aggro deck, that can be very difficult for you to catch up. However, you can catch up with these choose 1 cards. There can be some very powerful effects, like Starfall, for example, is pretty good when you can choose both of them together. A good board clear. But if you haven't drawn those cards, your opponent can just run away with it, depending on what deck you're playing against. I think this is the sort of quest that would be very good against a control deck, which is also playing quite slow. And then your choose 1 effect cards can really up your power level in the later game. But the other downside to this is how many choose 1 cards are you going to be putting into your deck? You can't fill your whole deck with choose 1 cards. So that kind of limits the potential of this Untapped Potential quest. So I don't think it's very strong. It obviously has a very strong effect, and I think it requires to be played in a much slower metagame. But maybe we'll see it having some play. But these first two quests we've looked at are not as powerful as the previous quests we've seen, or some of the previous quests we've seen. It seems like they're a bit easier to complete because this isn't very difficult to complete. It just has quite a big downside, I think, for the upside that you will get. But we'll see. Then moving on, we've got a Shaman card. This is the Evil Totem. 2 mana, 0/2 Totem. So we've seen 0 attack totems quite a few times in the game. And they usually do see play. At the end of your turn, add Lackey to your hand. So this has a very powerful effect. Lackeys we've seen from the recent expansion are very strong. You know, Lackey Rogue is very good just by generating loads of these 1/1s. You get so much value from it. The Evil Totem, to be honest, I don't see you getting a lot of value out of this. It does create a target for your opponent to kill, which is quite nice because if you're playing against a control deck and you put this down on turn 2, they might have to waste some removal just to get rid of this because they don't want it sitting there for a few turns. So it does have some potential. However, I just don't see it as being as good as like the Evil Miscreant, for example, in Rogue. You know, it's a different class, etc. But I don't know, maybe if there's some good ways to buff totems, for example, coming up, then maybe this will be a good one to be included. But at the moment, kind of like a bit of an average card. This one, speaking of average cards, I think this one's also a bit average. This is Jar Dealer, a 1 mana 1/1 with a Death Rattle, add a random 1-cost minion to your hand. So adding random minions to your hand can often be a bit weak. When it's 1 mana minions, it's the potential for it to be bad is a lot less because you're just getting a 1 mana. Like the good ones, the difference between a good 1-drop and a bad 1-drop is much smaller than the difference between when you get higher up in the mana scale. So yes, the idea of this is you put it on the board, it gives you something else to play when it dies, and it keeps your hand full. So it's kind of good in a Zooey type deck. So Zoo Warlock might play this. It's a good target with the Death Rattle, it's a good target for cards like Grim Rally. But I don't see it being special. I just think this is kind of like an average card which will go into some Zoo decks, and it's kind of okay. But the stats are just not very good. It's just a 1 mana 1/1. So kind of an average card in my opinion. And next we have Plague of Death. This is an epic spell for Priest, and something that Priest needs, they do need some strong removal, and this is very strong removal. Silence and destroy all minions. So it's aimed at big Death Rattles. So when you play this, your opponent doesn't get the benefits from their Death Rattles. Everything just gets removed from the board. It also affects your own minions. So it is a very powerful effect. Priest is in a bit of a bad spot right now, and they do need cards like this. There are some key problems with this though, and I think the mana cost is huge. 9 mana is very expensive. Yes, it's a really powerful effect, and you do need it to cost a lot. But when you compare this to Psychic Scream, which was probably too powerful to be fair, but Psychic Scream could come out on turn 7. It did a very similar thing because it didn't trigger Death Rattles, but it gave them back to your opponent that they could draw later on. That had positives and negatives as well in itself. But this one just clears everything. Now, the problem is, it's not very good against aggro decks because often you're not going to make it to turn 9 if you're struggling in the game. It's not the sort of thing you can hang on and go, yes, now I'm safe, because if you play it, it's 9 mana. You've only got 1 mana left over to play a 1-drop. You can't even use your hero power. So it hands the initiative back to your opponent where they're like, okay, you've cleared my board, well now I can play some more minions. So you need to play this in specific instances where your opponent doesn't have any cards left in their hand. Maybe you play it right at the end of the game where they're just playing their last play, and this can win you the game. But if you're at like 10 health, your opponent's got a lethal on board with just 2 or 3 minions, and you're like, okay, I've got to just play this. I just play this. You play 9 mana, clear the board. Then they get to start their turn. They just put 10 damage on the board again with just a couple of minions, and then you're dead the turn after. So I think compared to Psychic Scream, this is not as good. I'm happy it's not a 7 mana card. I think it would be way too powerful. Potentially it could be 8, but we'll see. It's the sort of card that you would see in solo adventures because the effect's so good. But in the solo adventures, it would cost 4 mana or 5 mana. And I know it's supposed to be broken at that point, but I just think 9 mana seems a bit too much. If this was played when N'Zoth was around, you know, it's awesome against N'Zoth or Gul'dan. So they play their big turn, N'Zoth comes on the board, loads of Death Rattles, Gul'dan brings loads of demons. You play this, it kind of like ruins their big swing turns. But for other board clears, I think it's too expensive. Next is a pretty exciting card, the Puzzle Box of Yokes. So this is a mage spell, so mage only, epic. It costs 10 mana. So it's basically Yogg-Saron for mage. Cast 10 random spells, targets chosen randomly. So this is very different to Yogg because it is just a spell. It's capped at 10. You don't get less, you don't get more, you just get 10. So when you think about it, playing Yogg with 10 spells was always a good Yogg. You could get more, but often you would get less than that, right? So 10 is a pretty decent number of spells to be able to play, and when they're guaranteed. But the problem is, you usually would play Yogg as a catch-up in a lot of instances. So you've lost the game, you play Yogg, and hopefully you can get back into it. And having the 7/5 body of Yogg as well was also important. So if you played it, you cleared a couple of minions, and you drew some cards, you healed maybe, and you kept a 7/5 on the board. This, potentially, you spend 10 mana. If you get lucky, you draw some cards, the board gets cleared, but then it goes back to your opponent's turn and they can fill the board again potentially. So I don't know whether this is a very playable card, but it will be randomly generated a lot of the time. And I think that's why this is put into the game, really. It's kind of like a randomly generated spell which will be fun at certain times. It can also cast itself again, I believe. So if you play this for 10 mana, if one of those 10 spells is Puzzle Box of Yokes, it will cast it again. So yeah, it's just a fun card, and I think mostly will be reserved for memes, but we'll see. Maybe a big spell mage deck would want this. Next up is the Questing Explorer. This is a 2 mana 2/3, so stats are okay. You could just play this on 2 on its own, but it does have the battle cry: if you control a quest, draw a card. So cards like this are very important for quests, because I talked about them being a bit of a negative when you play a quest. Cards like this help you to kind of catch up a little bit. The stats don't help you catch up, but drawing a card with a 2 mana 2/3 is very good. The downsides of this are that we saw the quest in Druid, for example. It's going to be kind of completed a lot quicker in the game. Probably by turn 6, 7, 8, you'll probably have finished that quest, depending on how you play it, obviously. So this card, if you don't draw it in the early game, your quest's going to be completed, and then you're not even going to get the benefit. But it's still a 2 mana 2/3. So this is just strong. It's just a good card in a quest deck, and I think if you're playing a quest deck, ultimately you'll play this. Restless Mummy is the last card for today, and this is a 4 mana 3 attack 2 health minion, and it has Rush and Reborn. This is just for Warrior, so it introduces the new Reborn mechanic. And this is quite an interesting mechanic. What it is basically is when the minion dies, it gets returned to life once with 1 health. So in this instance, it would be a 4 mana 3/2 that when it dies, it summons a 4 mana 3/1. Now this card is very good. I think this is a really strong card because it's got Rush. So on turn 4, you can rush this into a minion. It dies, comes back with 1 health, and you can rush it back in again. So it's effectively 4 mana, deals 6 damage. It's also 6 damage you can split up between different minions. You can target it just on 1 minion. So it's a very flexible card. You could also just play it on its own, and it's just a 4 mana 3/2 Death Rattle, summon a 4 mana 3/1 with Rush. So we've seen before that flexible cards in Hearthstone are very strong. So I don't see this one being any different. It's like Warrior plays Militia Commander, and that has 5 attack when on the turn you play it. And it does have more health though, so the likelihood is you'll end up having a 2/1 or 2 attack minion left on the board after you've played it. This, however, if you were to use a 6 damage, you won't have anything left. It will have died. It's really good, basically. I think it's good removal at 4 mana. 4 mana deals 6 damage as a spell is good. So yeah, when you can have minions and the flexibility to not even kill it off at certain times, it's sticky. If it stays on the board, your opponent has to kill it twice. So yeah, a really good card. I'm interested to see the rest of the Reborn cards, actually. So that's all of the cards. Pretty exciting. We haven't seen any of the Explorers yet, so we don't know whether they're going to be part of the cards, but it'd be interesting to see Finley coming back and Reno coming back. Hopefully they do make some cool cards around that concept, maybe with different effects. different types of flavor would be interesting to see. But yeah, let me know what you think of those cards, guys. There's a couple of different bits of information that they talked about. They also kind of announced the next Dalaran Heist. It's not going to be called Dalaran Heist, obviously. They didn't announce the name, but that's going to be coming in September. So this comes out on August the 6th, but they're going to be waiting a full month until the solo expansion comes out in September. And I really kind of like that. One of the really big problem of Hearthstone has been, here's a new expansion, enjoy it for 6 weeks, and then get a bit annoyed for another 6 weeks, 2 months until the new expansion comes out. But with the Rise of Shadows, I just think Blizzard has done really well in terms of keeping players engaged. They've done nerfs, they've done buffs, they've released the solo content, and it just kind of, they introduced Snip Snap, and it just kind of felt like the game has constantly been a bit more fresh and reducing the downtime of the Hearthstone. Because we don't really want them to be introducing more expansions, because then it just gets way too expensive. They can't do that. They can't introduce more expansions than they already do. But changing the game up in between is really quite cool, and I like that they're going to continue to do that with the Saviors of Uldum, bringing the solo mode a month after the launch of the actual expansion. So they also announced the new bundles. There's the 80-pack bundle, which they usually do. This one actually comes with Elite Starseeker, a new hero for Druid, which is pretty cool. You get 80 packs, also a random golden legendary and a card back, which is pretty good. And then they also have the other 50 card bundle, which has just a golden legendary random and the card back as well. Also, if you log in for the first 90 days, you will get a free quest. So everybody's going to be getting a free quest, which is quite cool, even if you don't pre-order. Alright guys, well that's all the news. I'm pretty excited. We only have a month to wait, which is also really cool. So thanks for watching the video. Let me know in the comments. It'd be interesting to know what you guys think of this expansion. I will be doing more card reviews, so stay tuned. I'll do the reviews as they come out. And yeah, it's hype season. I'm looking forward to it. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.